Hello, my name is Michael Kehio. In this video, we're going to be looking at the importance of governance and compliance frameworks when it comes to protecting the organization's data and compliance with relevant applicable laws. Now, we'll start off by looking at this serious data breach case involving Westpac. Now, in this case, a Westpac manager handed over banking passwords of 80 customers to a mortgage broker. Now, remember, this was not by accident. This was actually deliberate, and it was not because of a cyber attack or anything like that. And so this brings into question the culture that exists within Westpac. But it also brings into question the controls or the quality of controls that Westpac has over password protection. Now, the Australian National Regulator for Privacy and Freedom of Information does compile a report relating to the notifiable data breaches that have been reported to the Commissioner. Now, between July and December 2020, what is interesting is that 43% of data breaches were actually relating to human error or a system fault. Now, this is interesting because this actually speaks of a weakness in the internal controls of the organization. And remember, this is not because of a cyber attack. This is actually just human error or system fault. In this case here, you can see human error accounted for 38% of the breaches there. Now, let's go back to Westpac. Now, Westpac is a listed organization, and consequently, it ideally should comply with the ASX governance principles. Now, by just looking at that case, we can say that Westpac did breach or did not comply with a number of these principles. Which ones, for example? The key three ones I have identified are recognize and manage risk, lay foundation for management and oversight, and the culture of acting lawfully, ethically, and responsibly. So it's very clear. Either Westpac did not identify this as a risk or did not put adequate controls to manage the risk that passwords could be compromised. The next thing there is it brings into question the level of oversight that management has over employees and over the systems and processes within the organization. And the last one there is it's obvious that this employee did not act ethically or responsibly. Now, so what is a robust compliance framework? A robust compliance framework is normally driven or ideally driven by the board and management. So they don't just offer lip service. They are actually there proactively driving it, giving the employees all the resources that they require, supporting the employees, empowering them, but also holding them accountable. Now, what will generally happen is by doing that, the board will be building or developing or implementing a very compliance-centric culture. Now, another component of a good compliance framework is it would have very strong risk management structure and processes. So there will be identification of compliance risks. What are these risks that the bank could potentially breach? Is it around anti-money laundering? Is it around privacy and the like? And then what are the controls, either embedded within the systems or just an awareness to employees of how to comply with these laws? The organization also needs to have a very strong chief compliance officer, someone who is very experienced. And so the question now is, did Westpac have that? And the final one there is there must be testing of compliance. So, and really analyzing any breaches that occur and making sure that the lessons are learned. Now, one of the key things that will also be looked at when it comes to Westpac is the 3 lines of defense. Which of these lines of defense actually failed to prevent that breach from occurring? Is it the first line of defense? That is very clear that happened because this banking manager who sits in that first line of defense did not comply, did not implement the requirements of the compliance policy. And so that's the first line of defense. The next question will be, did the risk, and these are the people who write the policies, did the policy owners include this as a risk in their policy programs, in the policies of the organization, in the compliance framework of the organization, in the governance framework of the organization? And what controls were put in place to mitigate this? So that will be another question that Westpac has to ask itself. And the third line of defense here is internal audit. Most of the time, it's this independent assessment of processes and systems within the organization. And so the question will be, has the internal audit team ever audited the level of controls or the quality of controls around password protection? And so this will be the question that Westpac needs to ask itself. Which part of these three lines of defense failed? Is it the first line of defense? Is it the second line of defense? Is it the third line? Or is it all of them combined? Now, what is interesting again about Westpac is later on, there was another breach of the Anti-Money Laundering and Counterterrorism Act. And so basically what happened is, because of that serious breach, Westpac decided to completely do a complete reassessment of its governance and culture. So it did a reassessment of its governance framework, of its culture within the organization and the like. And you can see from this report, what is interesting, and I'll use a pen here to highlight this, is Westpac identified that it had weaknesses when it comes to its culture, when it comes to its governance and accountability. You can see the three lines of defense are also mentioned here. And it also has the challenges in execution and staying the course. A number of things are also mentioned here, including risk culture, risk boundaries, fast line ownership, and the like, the things that we have talked about. And so that is what Westpac did. So how did Westpac go about fixing these issues? And so the key things that it identified is it needs to improve when it comes to the tone that is set by the board and management. And you can see there, the first key thing there is direction and tone set by board and the group executive. The Westpac was able to identify that was clearly wanting. Now you can also see that there were no clear risk boundaries for decision making. So that issue of empowering employees, but also making sure that they are aware of the risks that are relevant to Westpac and how to mitigate them, was also lacking. And the final thing there is just making sure that employees are held accountable, but that they are also empowered. So those are some of the action plans that Westpac decided to put in place. So in conclusion, it's very important to remember that governance and compliance frameworks and policies are very important in protecting data and making sure that the organization is compliance-centric, or that the organization has a compliance-centric culture. Thank you.